And welcome back. Well, if you're watching the video in series, let's recap a little bit what was in the previous video. So we got our radiator support installed. Went ahead and got our transmission cooler mounted as well, and got those lines connected. We also worked on getting the radiator in here, and we started to test fit the condenser. And if you recall, we just didn't like the way the condenser was lining up. Some of the items we had to manually bend on the new condenser because it was just out of tolerances. And they made quite a few changes to it that just made me uncomfortable of wanting to install it or use it. So I made mention that we ordered a Denso unit as a replacement, and that unit has arrived. And you can see it there. And I believe there's a part number, on the side of the box we can look at. And I can already tell you, just by the difference in the packaging alone to protect it, it's night and day difference thus far. But when we get it up here, we'll see how well the fitment is. And we went ahead and attached our stub lines that went to our transmission cooler. So the lines from the transmission stopped right about here where you see the caps. And these smaller lines plug into those. And eventually these ends will end up inside the transmission cooler side of the condenser. So let me continue to work to get this new condenser unboxed, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you a bit more of this packaging. You can see all the paper packaging that was put into the sides of the box to help protect the fins. You can also see that they gave you a removal and installation pamphlet, as well as a service pamphlet that also came inside the box. And you can see not only that, but it's also been banded to a protective piece of cardboard while they were at it. So again, like I said, night and day difference as far as the protective packaging alone. And we can already see that this one, it looks like they were in the process of spray painting it. Looks like it may have only been painted on one side rather than two, but I guess that's kind of minor. But we can see that it did come with that manifold piece for the AC connection separately, just like what comes on the OEM original. And it looks like we also got these brackets, which are detachable, these mounting brackets that mount onto the radiator on this side, which are detachable. And it looks like the ones over here look like they're welded. Let me see here. Well, I can feel bolts underneath that, and I'll show you that. So so it matches and it doesn't surprise me. Like I said, Denso is OEM for Mopar, so this should be pretty close, if not spot on, to if this were a Mopar order and not a Denso order. But let me get the straps cut on this. I'll get you set up on the tripod. I'll bring you back, and then we'll see about getting it fit in front of our radiator here. So one moment. And welcome back. So I've got the radiator kind of picked up and swung off to as close as the engine I could get it, just to get the throw to get this condenser in. And yes, the condenser, I can show you here real quick. It is painted. It's painted on the outward side. You see through the grill, and on the engine side you can see it's not. But like I said, it's fine. It's not going to affect any. As long as everything I care about is making sure that it fits. Let's see if we can get these tabs started. I can tell you that this condenser is thicker than the first one we were using. Yep, and I just knocked a port blocker off. Okay, let's see. Yeah, this is going to be a tight fit. Okay, so this bottom bracket that bolts that slides into the radiator, and I'll show it to you, is welded, and this top one is not, and it looks like it's probably about an eighth of an inch too low to meet up to the top mounting point in this radiator. So you can get the bottom. I'll show you. I'll take this out and show you what I'm dealing with. You can see that one's welded in, and it's just a hair too low, because then if you get the bottom one in, you can't get the top one in. Now the top one is screwed in place. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pause you. I'm gonna take the screws out of this one. That way we can get the bottom one in, and we'll see if we can get enough slack by loosening this up to get this top slide area here to slide into that bracket on the side of that radiator. So let me pause you one moment. And welcome back. So I think that might give us the play that we need to get these tabs to line up. So let me get the bottom one started first. Okay, yep, that did it. Okay, so this top clasp, and I'll get you off the mount here just to show it to you before we pull the radiator back into position. So just by loosening this one up, I gave this one, you can see, enough free play in there to get it mounted up. It was just tweaked down a bit too low. So let's get you back into a position here where you can see a bit more. Let me just swing the radiator forward first, and then let me tighten up these bracket bolts while we've got access to it. See, now our bolt holes are lining up where our mount points are at. Okay, bolts are re-tight on that bracket. Now I should be able to swing the radiator forward and start putting the rest of the mounting hardware back in. So we're already in our bottom mount on our driver's side. Let's just swing it forward. Get our bottom radiator mount back in place on our passenger side here. Okay, perfect. Let me pause you, zoom you out, and bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So I got you zoomed out so you can see a bit more of this. Get your palm, there we go, down a little bit more. So these are just the upper main bolts for the radiator. Let's get those installed. Actually, before we do that, let's see if we can get our transmission lines routed to where they need to be. And just like before, the little horseshoe clips are already in the grooves, so we should just be able to bring our transmission lines up here and press them into place. Now obviously one's shorter than the other one, so they're only going to go into one specific port. Need a bit more push on this line. It is almost there. Let's see. We are hitting that right there. Let's see. May have to slide the condenser. Yeah, slide the condenser a little bit more to the passenger side to get some extra reach. It seemed like that clipped. Yeah, that line's not pulling out. Okay. Okay, what I'm going to do, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to pull the clip out of this line and just try this again and make sure this seats. Because we are hitting... Okay, so that's got to get slid down at some point. And we need to pick this line set. We're hitting a bottom bracket here where this mounts into the radiator. So this line set, there's a little plastic clip right here that clips both the lines and attaches it to the radiator. What I'm going to do is take that clip off so that we can independently manipulate these lines, and then I'll bring it right back. I just want to make sure I hear that make an audible click so we know that line's locked in place. Let me get a small screwdriver and bring it right back. And welcome back. So I went ahead and just took the clip off and pulled the line back out. It definitely wasn't, it's there, but it's not quite locking in place yet. This was that clip I was telling you about on the bottom. It just holds the two transmission lines as one piece, and then you pass a bolt through it and it screws down to an anchor point on the side of the radiator. So I'm just in the process of trying to get this line to go in as straight as possible and to lock, because you can see there I'm able to pull that line out, and I shouldn't be able to do that, which means it's locking in but not quite locking in. It's like I can see the clip raising up. It's just not quite going in all the way to lock. Yeah, it's almost there, but not quite there. Let's see, am I hitting... No, I'm not hitting anything with the radiator. Line looks nice and straight. Tell you what, let me do this. Let me get, I'm going to put a little bit of automatic transmission fluid on this just to kind of lubricate that in a little bit, and then we'll give this another shot. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we took that line back out. It was in the clip, but it wasn't quite in far enough for the clip to lock. So we ended up taking out that lower brace that we were telling you about. Now this grabs hold of both transmission lines, snaps in place, and then you pass a bolt through this to then secure the transmission lines to a mount point on the side of the radiator. So we put a little bit of ATF fluid on this fitting just to help kind of ease things along, and now that we've got kind of more movement or independent movement of that top line, we're going to see if we can get this top line to line up better, and then hopefully lock in better than what it was. Let's see, did that go all the way in? It's possible. Okay, yeah, that's in there now. So that kind of helped us out. Helped us out to have some independent movement of that. And let's see if we can get the bottom one. See, now you see I can pull on that. That ain't coming out. That's nice and secure. That's what we were looking for. That's what we were having trouble with on the last one, was getting that to lock in correctly. So we're going to do the same thing to the bottom one, since it seemed to help. Also, if you're having trouble getting these clips to engage the line, make sure that the clip is actually seated, I'll show you here, on these grooves correctly. So to show you what one of them looks like, if we go to our old ones, or an existing one, you see how they got that shape to them. So there's 3 grooves on those collars. That'll stick out of one, that'll stick out of one, and that'll stick out of another one. And it uses those 3 points to kind of grab the shoulder of that line. So that's what I'm doing when I was trying to get that to lock in, was to get this clip to snap back down and grab a hold of that line. And before, I was able to just kind of tug it and get that line to pop out of there, which is obviously not what we're looking for. Let's get you back up on your mount. Let's see if I can get you in a better spot to see that second fitting. There we go, that's better. Now the question is, will the mount stay there if I bend the legs around or no? Yep, looks like you might stay put. You moved a little bit, but it still looks like you got a view into what's going on there. And we want to take this line, which needs to go under that line, and then come over. There we go. See, that one made a much more solid, definite click. That upper line is definitely in. So now we can just take our 2 caps. And did that one seat all the way? Maybe not. Well, it made it click like it did. Okay, that clip on that bottom one is not quite entirely setting flush, because I can't get the cap on it, which tells me we're not quite there, even though we locked. Yeah, it's hitting the arm on this other side. Okay, so we've got some. Let me fidget with this. It's this leg right here on this side. This particular clip is having an issue. So one moment. And welcome back. So I got you readjusted a little bit. Finangled with this clip a little bit. And let's see if this helps this lock in. There we go. Okay, we are in. We are seated. There we go. Now our clip's on. Okay, I'll tell you what I had to do there. I had to pull the clip off they gave us and put actually one of the original clips onto that collar in place. So it's something with the placement of that clip. It wasn't seating all the way, allowing that cap to go on. But we got a nice secure grab on the line now. And, yep, now that one is on. Good deal. Okay, so we got both our clips, both our lines. Now what we can do is tilt the radiator forward, and then we'll get this put back on and start securing some of our hardware. Let me move you. Okay. Still inside of our slots for here, yes. We're still in our bottom slot. No, we came out of our bottom slot on our radiator because I was doing all the fidgeting. So let me get this back into position. Okay, bottom one is in, and top one is back in, bottom one is in. Okay, good. So I just fixing those tabs on the side where it locks into the radiator. Let's try this again. Okay, good deal. That all looks good. Everything came forward. We should be able to put our mounting screws into the front of our radiator. Okay, so let me get you readjusted. I'm gonna get you a pause. I'm gonna bring you back. I'm just gonna loop this piece of tape over and tape it to the front radiator support just to hold everything forward. And let me get some hardware and I'll bring you right back. One moment. And we'll come back. So these are the 2 bolts that secure the condenser to the front of the radiator. And as you can see, we're just a hair off. Yep, we need to come down just a little bit. Let's see, right about there. Okay, that one is started. And this one needs just a little bit, well, looks like it's pretty well lined up. Okay, now I gotta flex it down just a hair. Let's see if I can get you situated on the bumper mount here. There we go. Okay, that gets our bottom bolt started. Just put them in finger tight for now until we get all of our hardware to line up. And then we will go from there. Now let's get that side piece on that I was telling you about. You can kind of see where it goes right there. We may have enough slack. I can maneuver that in. I may just have to loosen our bolts up a little bit so I can get that piece back on. I'll tell you what, let me create some slack here. Let's see. We don't have to go very far. We only got to go about that far with it. But we do need to get our lines in. So it'll lock back in place on the lines. see, we got our top one in. There we go. We just got to snap our, I'm sorry, I'm getting in your way, but I need to reach into here. That's the second one. I'm just lining up the witness marks in that bracket with where it stood before. Ah, now we need it to clasp. Okay, that bottom line. Okay, so rather than, you know, burning up a bunch of film time here while I'm just fighting getting this clasp to lock back onto these lines, let me continue to manipulate this and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Also, if you hear any thunder and rumbling and rain in the background, I apologize. We're getting hammered by a rainstorm right now. But just to show you, that mounting block is snapped back on the transmission lines, bolt started. This manifold has had its mounting bolt started into the radiator support, and to be fair, just like the last condenser, I had to manipulate and kind of bend this out ever so slightly to get it to clear everything and be able to get that bolt started. So like I said, it's so far a much better fit, but still required a bit of manipulation. And to be fair, it's anything like that can happen. It could have just gotten tweaked in shipment, tweaked in manufacturing. There is one item that we're going to have to address. You can see the upper line set for this transmission cooler is almost right up against this tensioner. Now they've got a little cutout in it, a little angled cut. It looked like they did that for clearance, but what we can do, that little line, that little clip that holds the transmission lines up to the bottom of the oil pan on that stud, we can pull that down just ever so slightly and kind of give us some slack in between here. We can also come in here and kind of gingerly kind of bend that line, that upper line down just a bit to also give us some clearance. So once we get everything tight, we're definitely going to want to come back and address that, because we don't want that to obviously rub on that line long term. It may cause us some, you know, obvious issues. So what I thought we would do next, I'm going to get a pair of gloves on. We're going to take these port blockers off, and we're going to see if we can get our two AC lines in here. And it looks like the bottom one is going to be our liquid line, and our... Now it looks like the bottom one will be liquid. We could put it there as well. Are these two different? Okay, yeah, they're two different port sizes. And it looks like the smaller one, which is our liquid line, goes on the bottom, and the larger one goes on the top. So let me get a replacement for this washer right here. We'll get that on there. We'll get it coated with a little bit of AC compressor oil, and we'll see about getting these two locked into place. So let me take care of that and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our O-ring lubricated on our smaller line here. And we got our retention bolts ready. Let's see how well this is going to match up for us, or just give us a sheer amount of pain. Oh, let's see. Yeah, that is our bottom one. Okay. And you can see this. There we go. Yeah, this line's been tweaked a little bit when it was being taken apart, so I'm kind of have to gingerly persuade it back into shape. to get it to play along. There we go. So now we're in. We're not touching any metal up here. That's good. Let's just get a bolt in it to hold it for now. I'm telling you what, we are getting hammered outside right now with a storm, and I mean hammered. Okay, our upper line should go here. And let me get a glove on and a little bit of compressor oil on that. Okay, just gonna again lube up this O-ring so it doesn't go on dry. There we go. Okay, so now we can get those two tight. And then I'll bring you back. While we're at it, we need to put our, this should come with a new O-ring, but we'll check it. There's a pressure sensor that needs to get screwed into this line and plugged in the wiring harness. And then over here, we talked about, since we're keeping this existing liquid line, we're going to change that Schrader out to a new one. But let me get that hardware tight. And all of this mounting hardware, so again, our 2 bolts for our condenser to our radiator, and then our 2 mount points for the AC manifold you see here, bolts to the radiator. Transmission needs to bolt to the radiator, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we've got it all tightened up at this point. We've got our condenser to radiator bolts tight. We've went ahead and put our upper radiator bolts in as well, so there's attached to the support. We tightened up our 2 refrigerant lines that you can see here, as well as the little bolts on the hold the refrigerant line to the side of the radiator, support it, and then the little bolt here that also, as we looked at earlier, goes through this bracket and supports those lines. So now, with finally our radiator and our condenser in place and everything lined up, we can now get the intercooler, so it'll be yet a 3rd radiator. So we've got the main radiator for engine coolant. We've got this radiator, which does transmission / AC condenser, and then we'll put the 3rd radiator, which actually 4th if you count this one, but we'll put a 3rd radiator in front of this technically radiator that'll be the intercooler. So once we have the intercooler in place and we know where it's going to sit, then we can start looking and seeing where they want us to run our interduct piping. So we're going to have a line that comes in, and of course a line that goes out. And on this model, they're both on the same side. So I think they're actually going to utilize that space in there, if I remember correctly. So we got a little bit of space between here, and you can see our lines here. And it's going to be probably a bit of a tight fit, but we shall see. So what I've got up here, if you remember, I commented on, again, we're keeping this liquid line, but while we're here, we're going to go ahead and change out this Schrader valve. And this is just a kit that I got off of Amazon. As you can see here, I'll put a link in the description. Comes with all types of different sizes, and it looks like the one that we're going to need is the one they give us 3 of right there. You can see that. And when I look this up, yes, I'm grabbing this with, I'm grabbing the tool There we go. I was in there just a little bit tight, which you would expect. After being in there since 2012, because I doubt these lines have been changed out. Let me get the other tool in there. There we go. Perfect. Yep, that definitely looks like the one that we need right there. I will say that the quality of this kit, at least as far as its tools, is yet to be seen, because you can see what happened with the metal removal tool. Boy, it bent that piece right out. So I probably won't put a link to this in the description, to be honest with you, because if that's what it's going to do on the first use, I don't want anybody else to use this thing. Okay, but we will see if this valve works. So there's our replacement. Okay, again, just kind of hand tight, more than enough. I mean, I'll put a link in the description, but I guess kind of buyer beware, but just applying torque to remove that stuck Schrader valve was enough to bend that one tool in the kit up. But the other tool, like I said, it seemed to install fine. It seemed to tighten up, but we'll find out if we're going to have any leaks in it. But the other item I was telling you about was the pressure switch, which goes on this particular model, this line right here, and you can see they've got a brand new O-ring on it already waiting for us. But what I want to do, as with our custom, because we're dealing with a refrigerant O-ring, or actually just any O-ring in general, I would do this too, unless the instructions said to specifically not do it. Gonna get a little drop of our PAG oil, and you can see there, and I'm just going to lubricate this O-ring just so that pressure sensor doesn't get installed dry. I'm just reusing the pressure sensor off the old line, and you can see that there's a little pin in there to depress the Schrader valve, which is inside this line, and the O-ring is there to provide our seal. Okay, so I will put a wrench on that and tighten that up here in a short. And with that being said, that takes care of at least our AC line installs at this point. Granted, later on we'll have to draw a vacuum on the system and just verify that we don't have any leaks. But what I will do, I will pause you, I'll bring you back, and we'll see about getting the supercharger intercooler mounted in, and then we can go from there. So one moment. And welcome back. So as promised, just getting the intercooler squared away. So this is the intercooler itself, as you can see here. Inside of this hardware bag, the 09-010 Dodge Ram intercooler hardware bag, you can see there, came 3 bags of hardware. And we were on page 11 of our install manual for this. And the first thing says 2013 plus model year, skip to 8. Well, that's not us, so we're going to continue on. So we already have our hood latch removed from our disassembly. We haven't put that back on yet, so we can step 1's done. Step 2, install the upper intercooler brackets and horn bracket as shown with the M6 by 1 inch by 60 millimeter bolts and washers and the 1/4 inch spacers. Leave brackets loose to help with installation of the horns. So what it looks like we've got to build using the brackets you see there is that contraption there. And then the horns will bolt to this contraption, using various bits of hardware. Like there's the 1/4-inch spacers they referenced. There's another metric hardware bag. And you can kind of see a picture of what they're trying to get at as far as the mounting. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut open these bags so we can access this hardware and start to look into assembling what you see here, which is these top bolts, washers, spacer, this long bracket here at the top of the bag, the next set of washers, and of course the lock nuts for the back. And if I had to guess, yep, that's the bolts we're going to need. The bottom set out of this bag. We're going to need the spacers out of this bag, and of course all the bracketry hardware out of that one. So let me do this. We need these two pieces here, which look to be pieces with a big oval on the bottom. They look to be these, yeah, based on the picture, it's going to be this bar first and these two pieces. So let me get some bags cut open, get some hardware sorted, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we've got our assembly mocked up to match our diagram. And if I'm looking at this correctly, with the hood latch removed, it looks like they want us to come underneath on the underside of this and come out through the existing bolt holes from the radiator side out. Trying to think of a. Let me pause you and see if I can get you set up here on a tripod. One moment. And welcome back. So I just got you clipped to the radiator support here. And if I'm looking at their instructions correctly, it looks like, let me just push our horn relay out of the way. Looks like we're going to come out through the back. Just trying to line up where that bolt is going to come through the existing bolt hole. Looks like that may be one right there. And the threads match up and they'll thread through the existing thread on the radiator support for the hood latch. You can kind of see where this bracket is going in. Just trying to get this next bolt to line up with the existing bolt hole in the back again. Okay, there we go. So you can see we're threading backwards through the radiator support. And our threads are coming out the front, or what's left of the threads of the bolts. And there's not much give in this bracket, so as you do this, tighten them up evenly. Otherwise it'll wants to bind. There we go. Okay. So that's kind of, let me get you zoomed in, let me get you in a different position here so you can kind of see where that bracket goes. There's our spacers. And there's our 2 points. They're going to hang down and that'll hold the top of our intercooler. Now I dropped a bolt on down here, or a nut I should say, that I need to find. Small little thing too, probably bounced anywhere. I'll tell you what, give me a few moments to look for this nut that I dropped, It's the one that matches that. It's just got a nylon insert and it goes on the front. So you can see how these threaded in through the rear and they come out the front of this. But let me find that nut. One moment. And welcome back. So I got you zoomed in here on one of the mount points for the horns. I took the horns off their factory bracket, which looks like that, but kept the mounting, kept the nuts, the hardware behind the horns. And then it looks like what they want us to do. Just looking at their picture. Here is, it looks like they've got the connectors. Looks like they've got the horns kind of facing, obviously, the inside of the condenser, because that's the condenser there. And maybe like that. A bit like that. Let's try something. So they've got both external horn pieces. This piece, let me get these clamps on the other side of this wiring harness. Actually, that should be fine. So we just need to get it between the bracket and the condenser. Put our horns in. Man, that is going to be, yeah, it's going to be close. Tell you what, I'm going to take the wiring harness that you can see here and move it on the other side of this bracketry. Yeah, that looks better. I'll give you a slightly different shot of that once we get these horns on. I'll show you what I did. So if we take these horns, I go like this and bolt them in. Yeah, a little clear, but ooh, that's gonna be close. And it's going to be interesting to get in here with the amount of space you've got to get these nuts on here to secure this. Definitely want to leave this upper bracket loose with as much thread as you can, just to give you the space to get these horns remounted onto their bracket. Okay, so that's one. See if we can get the other one on here. Dropping hardware again. Tell you what, let me get you on the other side here so you can see what I'm doing. So you got this just a little bit of space between the upper radiator support and where this nut needs the thread. Yeah, you do definitely want to leave this upper bracket as loose as you can get it, just to give you the space, because this is a bit of a squeeze. Oh, you're starting to fall over a little bit. There we go. wait a minute. I dropped it again. Dang it. Okay, let me pause you and find this nut. I'll bring you back. Okay, welcome back. Let's see if we can get this on here without dropping this thing again. There we go. Okay, we still need to tighten everything up, but basically, so far, this is what it looks like. Let me pull you out here a little bit. So we got our bracket, which again is mounting backwards to forwards. They had us remove the horns off the factory bracket, which would normally just kind of hang like this on the other side, and move the horns, the factory horns, to their new bracket, again, which is bolted through and comes through the bolt holes that used to hold the hood latch into place. So the only thing I can picture now is it looks like we need to tighten up these bolts, and when we do, they'll come through enough threads for us to put our hood latch back on. So let me do that. Let me get this hardware tightened up and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So as we're tightening up, we got this bracket tight, and as we're tightening up these horns, I'm just, because you can see if they're down low, they'll actually hit the condenser. So as we're tightening them, I'm just rotating them this way ever so slightly, just to kind of give some clearance. You can see now there's plenty of clearance between the bottom of the horn and the condenser. Trying to keep them at the same level. And this is a 10 millimeter, in case you're wondering. Okay, so let's do this. Let me get you wrapped around the upper support here again. Kind of need to hold this. Yes. Old school, quarter turn at a time. There's not enough room in here to get the ratcheting end of this wrench on here, or obviously even a socket or anything for that matter. Okay, it's tight enough. So okay, so that takes care of our horns, and we should be able to now take our wiring harnesses. I'll show you here. Let me get you unwrapped. And there's one connector. Okay, locked. Let's get the other horn electrical connection made. You can see is right here. Okay, that one locked, that one seated, that one's locked. Okay, so we have our horns installed. We have this bracket tight, we have our horns tight, and we have our electrical connection done. So from what I can gather from looking at their pictures, it looks like this, our hood latch, goes in next, sits on our studs there, and then gets secured by our flat washers and our lock nuts. So let me go ahead and get these on, get them tightened up, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our hardware tight, or our new hardware tight, securing our hood latch. Just did our best to line them up with the marks that we made when we took the hood latch off originally. More than likely we'll have to come back and tweak this, but you know, not a big deal. Easy enough done. So since we're here, we're going to remake our electrical connection to our hood latch. Maybe. Let's see. There we go. Lock it back in. Now, because you remember before we added remote start to this truck. So that is the reason for that connection. But now that we have all of this kind of in place and mounted, we can take our lower intercooler support brackets, which are in our bag, and we can start working on getting these situated. And then looking at the book, they're going to get bolted behind the bolts that we put in the previous video for our power steering intercooler. Now, this horn relay that we made mention before, they just make a mention to kind of take it something like this and then just zip tie it to the existing harness. So I think what we may do, since we've got plenty of room right there, and it doesn't look like this will be in the way of hitting anything, we'll just shove it right here in this corner. We'll just get that zip tied, and that should secure it. Actually, we'll zip tie it the right side up so water doesn't get into it, but we're going to zip tie it basically something like that. They do give you some zip ties that came in the kit, but I've got some as well. So I'm going to work on getting the lower bracket kind of in place, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So just working on their lower brackets here, and from what I can determine is that they have removed the power steering cooler that's there, the two 10mm bolts that were in it, and in their place they give you these M6x1 by 20mm bolts that thread in to where the 10mm bolts you took out of, and you're going to thread them into the lower intercooler bracket. You can see something like that. And then what's going to happen is the intercooler, your power steering cooler, using these longer bolts with the, again, nylon lock nuts on them, is going to come up here and bolt into those lower bolt holes in that bracket. So in a sense, what we're doing is just taking the power steering cooler from here, and let me wake up the screen, and then just dropping it by about 2 inches and slightly lowering it to there. So what I need to do is get these tight, get it lined up with the power steering cooler, get this hardware through it, and I'll bring you back and show you what it looks like. One moment. And welcome back. So this is kind of what we end up with. We've got their bracket bolted into the original bolt holes, kind of matching their picture of where the power steering cooler went, and then the power steering cooler gets relocated and mounted to the bottom bolt hole of their brackets. Now, I haven't tightened up their brackets to the radiator support yet, so that way we can shift this up or down depending on if we need to do any adjustment to get the intercooler to line up with our holes here and also here. So we got a little bit of up and down movement with this should we need it. But that looks like that's going to be the next piece. And there's our hardware in this bag. You have bolts onto the 4 mount points on the back of our intercooler. And that should be, for an item that we'll get to later, that should be the grommet that we'll insert to then plug in our inlet air temperature sensor. But that'll be for when we get to doing the duct work. Or I should say the intercooled piping. So let me get these bolts cut out and get it positioned up in here and start to get things tightened up. So one moment. And welcome back. Well, as you can see, the horns are back off. We've loosened up this top bracket, and I'll explain why. Getting the 4 bolts into their brackets and into the intercooler is a fun bit of tasks, to say the least. You got a limited amount of space between these brackets and the condenser that you have in here. Now you could, if you have upper and lower radiator hoses disconnected like we do, you could just take your bolts out, swing your, well, you may have enough play. Yeah, you should have enough play in the lines. You might be able to swing the radiator out of the way and the condenser out of the way to give you some more room. But I was able to get just enough room by taking the two horns back out that kind of reach down in here. Also had to kind of come back and loosen up these brackets a fair bit to give their angle pieces some room to move. Otherwise, they weren't going to line up at all. And what was happening was the top ones wouldn't line up. Okay, so if you started like one on the bottom, got a couple threads in, then the top ones weren't in the right position. So what you can see has kind of happened here. I haven't tightened everything up yet, but we got them all four started, and you can kind of see the tops are at a little bit of an angle. They're kind of going towards the right and not straight up and down. And that seemed to be about the best position it was happy in, because we've got them all started at this point. Like I said, it's a bit of a bear. You can kind of get to the two top ones, and this lower one here isn't too bad, provided you leave the top ones loose. But that last one in the corner, like I said, I had to get it from underneath in order to get a bite on it. But the good news is we should be able to get a ratcheting wrench on it to kind of finish everything the rest of the way. But what I'm going to do is, and of course you can see we got the power steering cooler back off our lower brackets because we loosened these brackets up as well in order to give us some flexibility. Now, in order to get the lower power steering cooler back onto these brackets, they're going to need to be, straightened up a little bit. I mean, we may have a little bit of a play in it. Yeah, we may have to straighten this one, kind of push it off to the left in order to get the new bolts to line up through here. We got a little bit of a play on those because they're not threaded in. You're passing them through and then putting some lock nuts on the other side, and you can see the bolt hole in the existing cooler has quite a bit of space. It can kind of go left and right. So these brackets can be a little bit off. They don't have to necessarily be straight up and down. But anyway, that's what we're looking at. So to amend their manual, I would have to say that I know they have you put this back on and tighten certain bolts up. I wouldn't. I would just thread it all hand tight. That's the kind of the mistake that I made in the previous parts of the clip, was kind of tightening this area here down, when that's what was leading to a lot of our issue. Because you can see that this, again, it kind of needs to move because these are slotted through holes where this top bolt goes through. So again, so to amend their manual, get all this stuff in here loose, and I would leave the horns out until everything is tight, and then kind of come back behind myself and put the horns in. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work on getting the 4 intercooler bolts tightened up, cinch all this hardware down, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, we got everything tight at this point. We got the bolts going into the intercooler tight. Got all our hardware up here retightened from us loosening it. Got our horns back in, electrical connection for a hood latch is remade. Our lower power steering cooler is remounted into their lower half of the brackets that now hold the intercooler into place. So just to recap on, and you can see that we went ahead and just relocated our horn relay. Just kind of tie wrapped it in a couple spots on the harness and then on the frame right here, just in this kind of little unused corner. Seemed to have plenty of free space and a good spot to put it, versus sticking it over here where or over here close to the condenser. At least over here it's still serviceable, so in case something happens to the horn relay, we know it's right there in a corner, we can still get to it. So yeah, again, just to recap on that one, what I would have to say is leave the horns out, leave this loose, leave it all loose, leave the bottom part of it loose. You can even leave the power steering cooler off until you get everything done. I'd probably put that on last like we did here. but leave everything loose. Get all 4 bolts started into your intercooler. Tighten those down first, then tighten up this, then put your 2 horns on, then tighten down this hardware, tighten up your hood latch, get that situated, and then probably last, just again, use their hardware, go through the holes, now that you're not moving the brackets around anymore, and go ahead and put your power steering cooler back on. And we're nice and tight. As you can see, we're nice and tight and secure. I will say I did make one boo-boo on this one, but this bolt is long enough, we kind of compensated for it. If you'll see, when we put the intercooler on, the little ear, kind of rounded off part of the top bracket, actually had to come up, as you can see, just a hair above the pocket that it was sitting in. And when it did that, I went to tighten this bolt up, and it was kind of getting tight, but only hand tight. It wasn't really tightening up. And what it was doing, unbeknownst to me, is, remember, we're threading in backwards from the back side of this radiator support this way. This nut that was in here, notice I said was in here, is actually stamped on the outside of it. And I'll show it to you. You see that ridge on that bolt? This is actually inside, or at least in my case, on this side, was inside the radiator support rail on top. And I was tightening this bolt down first, because this one gets tightened first, then you put your hood latch on there, and you follow it up with that flat washer and a lock washer, and that locks in the hood latch. And what had happened was, remember, this sets flush with the outside, this part's inside, and this part's stamped to the outside edge here. And when that bolt over here was tightening, it actually pulled this forward and pulled it off the front part of the inside of here. So it was stamped, it pulled it forward like that, and popped it right out of the metal. So when you're tightening this bolt that goes through here first, do not crank down on that too tight, or be mindful of it. Once it starts to get, I'd say probably a little over hand tight, you want to stop at that point, because it's just the bracket for the horns. And then that should give you enough meat still on this side to put your hood latch on. Now, thankfully, this bolt was long enough that we could just push it through, put the flat washer and the lock washer on it, and as you can see, yeah, that's not going anywhere. It still has it nice and secure. It's not as solid as it would have been if that bolt hadn't pulled out of that out of the front. But oh well. Again, lessons learned. Because this thing popped when it came out, as you can imagine. I thought I broke a bolt at first until I realized what had happened. And again, minor, we were able to overcome it, but just, you know, FYI on that one. But as you can see, it's in, it's up front. We got plenty of space between here and the upper frame rail, and between here and the lower to get our hoses affixed. So again, just like we had theorized earlier, it looks like we're going to end up coming in through here to run our ductwork. So let me go grab the manual and find out what the first couple of pieces are. So one moment. And welcome back. Well, this is going to look a bit weird because I have to add another segment into here that I wanted to put into this video, because I discovered it just as I was getting things edited for this last video. So it's going to look a bit weird that we're working on the windshield washer reservoir in this clip, and in the next clip you won't see it, but I wanted to include this along the things to kind of keep in mind while you have this loose. If you remember, we loosened up all the hardware so we could get the 4 bolts and the procharger intercooler all mounted. Well, I noticed when I was editing that we hadn't put the windshield washer reservoir in yet, so I figured, you know, no big deal. Let me put it up there real quick, and discovered that the intercooler was too far forward to get this to fit. So I had to loosen up all the hardware again. It's still holding on, it's just loose, in order to push this more to the left to get the clearance necessary. And thankfully there was enough space between the frame and the front grille support, because I forgot there's the wiring harness for the pump motor and the tube for the washer fluid runs through this little opening here, because you also have an air sensor, air temperature sensor, that gets clipped in and plugged right there in front of the grill. So we were able to get that fish back through there where it belongs and kind of push this intercooler off to the left-hand side, which should now allow us to take our windshield washer reservoir and kind of get it squeezed back into place like you see there. So I'm going to go get the mounting bolts for this, and I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we got our windshield washer reservoir in, and the wiring's complete. Now that that's in there, while everything is still loose, we're just kind of looking at our spacing and our gaps. And what I'm going to end up doing is probably just slightly picking up on this manually, just to kind of level it out and give us a little bit better gap over here in the right hand corner, because now that the windshield washer reservoir is in there, we're a little bit closer to this upper support where this hose is going to go. So I'm going to, like I said, pick up on this and then tighten the intercooler in, and then we should be good, because once again everything's loose just to allow us to manipulate it. But I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our windshield washer reservoir installed. We got our wiring run appropriately. We got our air temperature sensor clicked back in. We got the water level sensor in the back of the unit also clicked in. Water pump's got power, it's clicked in, and of course the water tube itself is in. So you can see we got everything tightened back down again. I really hope this is the last time I have to loosen this thing up. But you can see we got a nice gap. So our intercooler is not touching there. And we still got a nice gap as far as getting our tubing or interducting and everything on. So I wanted to include that. Apologize for it being a little confusing, because in the beforehand clip, you're not going to see the water jug there. And of course, in this one you are. And then following this, it's going to disappear. So it's going to be gone here and then gone again, because of I'm making this again after the fact. We noticed while we were editing, we didn't install this. And then when we went to install it, we noticed we had an interference problem and had to kind of push the intercooler over. Now, as we were tightening the intercooler bolts up, the 4 bolts up in the back, I did manually pick up on this edge and pick it up ever so slightly, just to try and even it out across the top. So I think it's good where it's sitting. The other item I'm going to go ahead and take care of is the cable for the release. And you can just, again, you could just push that forward, clip that cable back in, and then we're done. But other than that, I just want to do that small update and throw it in there. And like I said, I apologize for the confusion, but the state that you see it in, and the thumbnail should also reflect this, but it'll be the state that it's in when we come back for the follow-up video to finish our interducting work. And thank you much. Bring it back for the next one. Bye. And welcome back. So we're just in the process of going over the next steps for the intercooler tubing installation. And this is all parts that are still in that same bag that came with all the hardware for all the brackets for mounting the intercooler. And the first thing they want us to do is to trim an inch off, trim 1 inch off the short end of one 90-degree rubber elbow, and one extended leg 90-degree rubber elbow is shown. So it looks like we need to trim an inch off the short end of this elbow and trim 1 inch off the end of this extended 90-degree. And the first one, the extended 90-degree elbow, is going to get installed on the lower inlet. So I just kind of held it up there, and what it looks like they're doing is that they're just bringing it in about an inch, so it clears most of this and kind of goes into the sweet spot in our opening. So just in the process of getting this one marked, and I just took a silver Sharpie, made several marks around it, and then just using a tie wrap to kind of line all the marks up, and then I can draw across it and then trim our inch off. So I'm gonna do that for both of these hoses, or both of these 90 degrees, the extended and the non-extended, and I'll bring you back. One moment. So real quick, I just wanted to show you that. So lining them up with a tie wrap just makes it easier so that you can then complete and make a solid line all the way across and give yourself something to cut on. So bring it right back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, as you can see, we started to cut our tubing for our intercooler, but unfortunately we have run into a problem. And there's a problem that I cannot address. I'm going to have to call procharger tomorrow because you can see here on step 3 where it says install tube number 316 into the lower elbow. And that's this lower elbow that we just installed, the one that we trimmed an inch off this side to bring it, a bit more this way. And unfortunately, this tube for 2011 to 2017, tube 316, it looks to be just a potential just short 3-inch piece of just metal tube. I do not have in the kit. Instead, what they sent me, instead of tube number 316, I have tube 293, which if we look at the 218 plus intercooler schematic, there it is right there. And 293 is not used on the 2011 to 2017. So whoever did the pack out on this kit grabbed the wrong tube. I did try to test fit that to see if we could get it to work, since it's not a straight through piece, since it does have the double 45 on it, and I couldn't get it to line up like it needed to line up. So again, I'm gonna have to call them tomorrow, and even though it's way after the fact, because I didn't have a chance to inventory this when it came in because I was out of state, and I should have checked it all when I got back, but I didn't. So bad on me. If I got to pay for the correct tube to be sent, then so be it. I will do that. But I will call them tomorrow and see if they can hopefully overnight me the correct tube so we can continue. But to recap, what we've done today is that we finished getting the radiator in. We finished getting the condenser in. We have our transmission lines hooked up to our condenser. We have our AC lines hooked up to our condenser, and we've got everything bolted in for the condenser and the radiator. We haven't put in the upper or lower radiator hoses on yet, because that will be done as part of the procharger install when we get to those steps. We got our intercooler, as you can see, bolted in here. We got our horns relocated onto the procharger's bracket. We've got our hood latch reattached and electrical connection. We got the horns reattached with their electrical connections. And we got the power steering cooler dropped down onto the alternate set of brackets that came with the kit. And we got our 2 hoses trimmed up in the kit that we need to have trimmed up, at least at this point in the deal. And as you can see, trimming an inch off of that brought the hose in, so it was more of a kind of a shot into the space. Now, believe it or not, that is the inlet, and we still have the outlet to plumb into here. And I did do a test fit on it. It's going to be a tight fit. It'll go, but it's definitely going to be a tight fit. They definitely utilized all the available space on that one to get that tube through there, let me tell you. Okay, so with that said, unfortunately, I'm going to, like we did on the last video, kind of look at the runtime of this one. I think it's long enough to be its own video at this point, and if that's the case, then you'll see the outro come up next. If not, it'll just cut into us continuing this once we have the correct lower piece, and I'll show you where it goes. It goes right here into this 90 and comes out a little bit, This 45 gets plugged into that piece, and then the pipe you see up there laying up on the cowl, that's for the anti-surge system. So literally we're just missing the piece to go from here to the 45 to the double 45, and then we can continue. So unfortunately it is what it is, but I will let you go, and like I said, you'll either see an outro cut into this next, or you'll see us kind of pick up where we left off. So one moment. Well, 3% battery life. Let's see if we can do this. As you saw, intercooler in, condenser in, radiator in, horns in, electrical connected, hood latches in and connected, and we've got the power steering cooler located as well. We ran into an issue starting our plumbing in which we are missing one of the pipes, and looks like they gave us the pipe for a 2018 for the next section we need instead of a 2012. So unfortunately, we're going to have to call it a video at this point until they can get me the correct piece, and then we can continue. So with that being said, if you have subscribed, I do thank you immensely. If you have not, please consider to do so. We have broken the 2,000 subscriber barrier and would love to see that trend continue. So with that being said, I do thank you. I'll bring you back for the next one. I do believe that covers everything we've done on this one thus far. Yes, it has. So with that being said, I'll let you go and I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.